Welcome back to Let's Play the Neverhood. Um, and we're still on the Hall of Records here. Right now we are up to Homen on the Hall of Records. Um, my nephew is not here. He hasn't been here for a while. That's why I haven't been recording any. But I figure I might as well just continue without him since he was really getting bored of reading all of these. Um, uh, I might as well talk a little bit before I continue about the design of this game and how they kind of put this. They kind of just thrust this whole long hallway of text in the middle here, and due to my insanity and obsessive compulsiveness, I am actually reading it all. You don't have to read this all. In fact, most people, when they play this game, do not read this at all. They just skip it. They just walk right through it. Even if you do not read this all, it's still like a good 10-minute walk to the end of this because it's like I said before. It's there's 7 crowns that, and so there's 7 of these chapters, and each chapter is like a good 5 or 6 screens that you're walking through. So it's a long, long hallway, and you do have to walk it. And it's it's tedious, and it's right in the beginning of the game. Maybe they shouldn't have put this in the beginning of the game. I think most game designers probably would not have put this. Like if this game came out today, I don't think they would. First of all, I don't think this would be in the game at all if this game came out today. But they definitely wouldn't have put it at the beginning of the game. There's probably something maybe hidden as an Easter egg, maybe towards the end of the game, or maybe just in a booklet, like as a feelie or something. Very strange to have it just written in the game, where you can just sit here and read for hours on end, and look at him just talking to his head. And just sit here and learn the history. I find it fascinating. I love reading it. I think they definitely. I think the reason they put it right out front here, and because they want you, they really want people to read it because they did put a lot of time and thought into this Bible of this world, and so they want people to read it. But it's just so much text. It's so much to read. The average person is not going to want to read it. Um, and I also think they were trolling the audience. Um, One thing people got to remember: these early adventure games, the developers loved to just torture the player. Especially the Sierra games, the early Sierra games. The two guys from Andromeda were especially notorious for this, where they just wanted to put the player through hell. Like having them walk like on tiny little pixeled spaces, and one little false move you'd fall to your death, or have them, have there's this one puzzle where like if you got kissed by an alien in the middle of the game, and then at the very end an alien would pop out of your chest and rendered the game unbeatable. And if you didn't have a save from before you got kissed by the alien, you had to start the game all over again. Even if you did have a save from before, then you still had to like go through like half the game. It was just relentless, the stuff they put you through, and I think that's just like games were just hardcore back in the old days. I I know I'm rambling on, but I figure I might as well talk for a little bit. Um, I've been running an original edition Dungeons and Dragons game. It's actually the Rule Cyclopedia edition, which is kind of the fourth iteration of the original, Gary Gygax D&D kind of came out around the same time as second edition D&D, but it was still running by the basic rule set. And people forget how hardcore those rules were. First of all, for any of you familiar with D&D, when you roll your stats, most people, if you play today, you would roll 4 dice and then you drop the lowest die to roll your stats, so that you generally pick the highest dice to roll your stats. Back then, no, you would roll 3 dice, and whatever you'd get, that was it. And you wouldn't be able to pick which rolls you wouldn't be able to say, okay, so I rolled an 18, I want that to go into strength because I'm a fighter, or I want that to go into intelligence because I want to be a wizard or something. No, back then it was just, okay, I'm rolling for strength. Okay, I got a 6 for strength, stuck with a 6, that's it. Okay, now I'm rolling for intelligence. Okay, oh, I got a 7 for intelligence. I'm a 7 for intelligence, that's it. Can't re-roll, I'm stuck with a 7. And I think the only thing you could do to adjust your stats was you can take 2 out of one of your stats to add 1 to another one. And you couldn't do that if you went below a certain amount. I think if you went below a 9 or something. And it was ridiculous. The worst, though, was you had to roll for hit points. And whatever roll you got was it. Like, if you rolled a 1 for hit point, you had 1 hit point. And if you were a mage, you were screwed because you only got a 1d4 to roll for hit points. You had a 1 out of 4 chance to get 1 hit point. Best you could get, best case scenario, you had 4 hit points starting out. So it was, and you had cloth armor. The best you could get as a mage was cloth for armor. And the only weapon you could use was a dagger, a 1d4 damage dagger. You had 1 spell, and once you used that spell, you were done for the day. You had to wait till you went to sleep so that you could rememorize your spell. It was brutal to be a mage at level 1. And I mean, eventually when you got to the higher levels, you became like a god. Like you surpassed the fighters were great at the early levels, but then they became pretty much useless. The hell? Jeez, I never saw that one. Then they became pretty much useless at the higher levels. But the mages became like gods at the higher levels, and the lower levels, though, they were like, you pretty much had to like hide behind. If you were by yourself, you were dead. But if you had to pretty much hide behind everyone, because if you were, you just didn't want to get hit at all, because pretty much one hit would kill you. Because like any attack from just any normal, like a D6 damage attack, pretty much would 1 hit kill you. But anyway, enough talking about D&D. I'm just talking about games in general, just how hardcore they were. You see them now, back then in the 80s and the early 90s. And this game too, this game came out in 1996. Around the time this game came out, I guess adventure games were sort of, they were still popular, but they were kind of going on the downhill by this point. I think around this time is when the first-person shooters were starting to take off. Like Quake was coming out, the Quake series was out, Duke Nukem 3D had come out, the Doom games were getting popular. I don't think Half-Life was out yet, but the first-person shooters were starting to get to build up in popularity. And I think PlayStation had just come out at that time, and the RPGs were very popular. Final Fantasy 3 was out. Actually, it was Final Fantasy 6 in Japan, but we didn't know that here in the U.S. And Chrono Trigger was out, and Secret of Mana. I remember playing that all the time back then. So the mid-90s, there was a lot of other games that were kind of a lot of other game genres that were replacing the adventure game genre as the most popular form, because up until that point, adventure games was the dominant form of entertainment. But adventure games were still popular, and this game came out, and they were still kind of people were still willing to put up with stuff like this, like to put up with the masochistic aspects of it. And I think I definitely have a masochistic streak because I've been sitting here for the past 4 episodes reading this, and to be able to do this, to deal with this, and to deal with the more tedious aspects of these games, which I think I don't consider them tedious so much because they are challenging in a way that they're not they tedious means like you're getting bored, like you don't want to play. And I guess my nephew got bored because he didn't want to sit here and read this, but I'm not bored. I like the story. The sliding block puzzle did annoy me, but it didn't annoy me to the point where I wanted to quit. I did want to keep going. Some sliding block puzzles, like the ones with a lot of pieces, then I want to quit. Then I hate those. But the 9-piece ones, usually you can figure them out if you sit there for a while. But most of the puzzles in this game are pretty fair. You know, most of them, sliding block puzzles are usually pretty lazy puzzles. I usually hate those. But anyway, enough of me rambling. I just thought I needed a moment to talk a little bit, give my thoughts on the game, so that I wasn't reading constantly. Let's continue this story. This is Homen. I guess we're up to what? Is this the 5th? Let's see. We did Agdilla. We did Numeron. We did Bert. No, it was Agdilla, Bert, Numeron, and then Ottoborg. So now we're up to the 5th. So this is Homen, or Homen. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but let's continue. Quater made Homen and gave him 2 crowns, and let him decide what to do with the extra one. Okay, so there's 2 crowns for this one. Homen had a son named Pinto Bunyan, to whom he immediately gave his 2nd crown. Pinto Bunyan helped Homen with all that he did. Homen made a bunch of beings called Ints. The Ints were blue and looked like little bugs. The blue Ints spent their first day of existence fashioning small spears. Soon the Ints had broken up into small communities. Each community had a specific task to accomplish, which helped all of the other Int communities. Blue Int South was in charge of growing food. Blue Int North built housing for other communities, and so on and so forth. All was peaceful and working efficiently, so Pinto Bunyan made some Ints of his own. Only his were white. Now it came about, when the white Ints began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the blue Ints saw that the daughters of the white Ints were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. The Hutsa Mutsa were in the Hutsa Mutsa were in the world in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of the blue Ints came into the daughters of the white Ints. Ew. Okay, they came into the daughters. Okay, I don't think there's anything implied by that. And they bore children into them. Okay, maybe there was something implied by that. Those were the mighty Ints, who were of old Ints of renown. The white Ints instantly mingled with the blue Ints, but they refused to acknowledge the community system of the blue Ints. The white Ints enjoyed the fruits of all the blue Ints' hard work, but did not help them to work at all. It only took one white Int to throw an egg at a blue Int one morning to cause a dreadful feud. So Hema of the blue Ints rose with all the blue Ints of war to go up to white Int East, and Hema chose 30,000 blue Ints, valiant warriors, and sent them out at night. And he commanded them, saying, "See, you are going to ambush the city from behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you be ready. Them Oh, then I and all the blue Ents who are with me will approach the city, and it will come about, when they come out to meet us, as at the first, that we will flee before them, and they will come out after us until we have drawn them away from the city, for they will say, they are fleeing before us at the first, so we will flee before them, and you shall rise from your ambush and take possession of the city. Then it will be, when you have seized the city, that you shall set the city on fire. See, I have commanded you. Most of those Ents of war in attendance could not understand Hemhema, for the language he used was flowery and outdated. Still, few in attendance there from among all of those in attendance did hearken and understand. Even did they reckon the sayings of Hemhema, and straightway did they clue in their buddies, who were just lollygagging about, scratching their heads. At once all who heard this explanation did understand Hemhema's plan, so Hemhema, I'm sorry, I keep saying Hemhema, but it's actually Hemhema. It might be Hemhema. No, it's Hemhema. Sent them away, and they went to the place of ambush, and remained between White Ent West and White Ent East, and the west side of White Ent East, but Hemhema spent that night at the Wagon Leisure Inn. Now Hemhema rose early in the morning, and mustered the Blue Ents, and he went up with the elders of Blue Ent before the Blue Ents to White Ent East. Then all the blue Ents of war who were with him went up and drew near, and arrived in front of the city, and camped on the north side of White Ent East. Now there was a valley between him and White Ent East, and he took about 5,000 blue Ents, and set them in ambush between White Ent West and White Ent East. On the west side of the city, sorry about that. So they stationed the blue Ents, all the army that was on the north side of the city, and its rear guard on the west side of the city, and Hemhema spent that night in Sid's garden spot. Lodge. And it came about, when the king of White Ent East saw it, that the men of the city hurried and rose up early, and went out to meet the blue Ents in battle, he and all his people at the appointed place before the desert plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city, and Hemhema, all the blue Ents pretended to be beaten before them, and fled by the way of the wilderness. And all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them, and they pursued Hemhema, and were drawn away from the city. So not an Ent was left in White Ent East or White Ent West, who had not gone out after blue Ents. Next screen. And they left the city unguarded, and pursued blue Ents. Then Homen said to Hemhema, "Stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward White Ent East, for I will give it into your hand." So Hemhema stretched out the spear that was in his hand toward the city, and the men in ambush rose quickly from their place. And when he had stretched out his hand, they ran and entered the city, and captured it, and they quickly set the city on fire. When the men of White Ent East returned back and looked, behold, the smoke of the city ascended to the sky, and they had no place to flee, this way or that, for the people who had been fleeing to the wilderness turned against the pursuers. When Hemhema and all the blue Ents saw the men in ambush had captured the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and slew the men of White Ent East, and the others came out from the city to encounter them, so that they were trapped in the midst of the blue Ents, some on this side and some on that side, and they slew them until no one was left of those who survived or escaped. But they took alive the king of White Ent East, and brought him to Hemhema. Now it came about, when the blue Ents had finished killing all the inhabitants of White Int East in the field in the wilderness where they pursued them, and all of them were fallen by the spear until they were destroyed. Then all the Blue Ints returned to White Int East and struck it with the spear, and all who fell that day, both male and female, were 12,000, all the people of White Int East. For Hemhemhema did not withdraw his hand with which he stretched out the spear until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of White Int East. So Hemhemhema burned White Int East and made it a heap forever, a desolation until this day. And he hanged the king of White Int East on a tree until evening, and at sunset. Hemhemhema gave a command, and they took his body down from the tree, and threw it at the entrance of the city gate, and raised over it a great heap of stones that stands to this day. So Ichi-Go-Plasti and all the White Ints who were with him arose by night, and lay in wait against the Blue Int South in 4 companies. Now Pimento Lufa, the son of Textradrill, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, and said, "Who is Ichi-Go-Plasti, that we should serve him?" And Ichi-Go-Plasti, the White Ints, and the White Ints who were with him, arose from the ambush. And when Pimento Lufa of the Blue Ints saw the White Ints, he said to Factotron, that sounds like a Transformer name, "Look, Ints are coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Factotron said to him, "You are seeing the shadow of the mountains as if they were Ints." And Pimento Lufa spoke again and said, "Behold, Ints are coming down from the highest part of the land, and one of the company comes by the way of the Diviners Sandwich. Then Factotron said to him, "Where is your boasting now, with which you said, 'Who is Ichi-Go-Plasti, that we should serve him?' Are these not the White Ints whom you despised? Go out now and fight with them." So Pimento Lufa went out before the leaders of the Blue Int South, and fought with Ichi-Go-Plasti, and Ichi-Go-Plasti chased him. And he fled before him, and many fell wounded at the entrance of the gate. Then Ichi-Go-Plasti remained at Blue Int West, but Factotron drove out Pimento Lufa and his relatives, so that they could not remain in Blue Int South. Now it came about the next day that Blue Ints went out to the field, and it was told to Ichi-Go-Plasti. So he took his White Ints and divided them into 3 companies, and lay in wait in the field. When he looked and saw the Ints coming out from the city, he arose against them and slew them. Then Ichi-Go-Plasti and the company who was with him dashed forward and stood in the entrance of the city gate. The other 2 companies then dashed against all who were in the field and slew them. And Ichi-Go-Plasti fought against the city all that day, and he captured the city and killed the Blue Ints who were in it. Then he razed the city and slew it with salt. And sowed it with salt. When all the leaders of the Tower of Blue Int South heard of it, they entered the inner chamber of the temple of Hallmark, or the door. Hallmark. And it was told to Ichi-Go-Plasti that all the leaders of the Tower of Blue Int South were gathered together. So Ichi-Go-Plasti went up to Mount Chlorescent, he and all the Ints who were with him, and Ichi-Go-Plasti took... That was a short one. An axe in his hand, and cut down a branch from the trees, and lifted it and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the Ints who were with him, "What you have seen me do, hurry and do likewise." And all the Ints also cut down each one his branch, and followed Ichi-Go-Plasti, and put them on the inner chamber, and set the inner chamber on fire over those inside, so that all the men of the Tower of Blue Int South also died, about 1,000 men and women. It's a genocide. Then Ichigoplasty went to Blue Int Southwest, and he camped against Blue Int Southwest and captured it. But there was a strong tower in the center of the city, and all the men and women with all the leaders of the city fled there and shut themselves in, and they went up on the roof of the tower. So Ichigoplasty came to the tower and fought against it, and approached the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain female int threw a 16-ton weight on Ichigoplasty's head, crushing his skull. Then he called quickly to a young int, his armor-bearer, and said to him, wait, I thought he died. How is he calling? Oh, so his skull is crushed, but he's still able to call. Draw your spear and kill me, lest it be said of me, a female int slew him. So the young int pierced him through, and he died. And when the white int saw that Ichigoplasty was dead, each departed to his home. So he just doesn't want people to know that a girl killed him. When the blue ints and the white ints started to fight, so did Pinto Bunyan and Homen. Quater stepped in and took Pinto Bunyan's crown away and gave it to a new being he made called Arvin. I remember Arvin from reading this before. He's the one that created the skull monkeys. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's one thing, too, about this is all of these histories are actually kind of relevant to the other games. This must be Homen right here. That's a picture of him. Because, like the skull monkeys, for instance, they're a creation of Arvin. Again, I'm kind of spoiling one of the later stories. Like that stuff, like these ints, these white ints and these black ints or whatever. But this whole racial warfare here. But we might see this in the new game, the Armakrog game. All this stuff, like this was a series of games, and they borrow all these worlds that they're mentioning in these games might come up in the sequels, because they have come up. They came up in Skull Monkeys. I didn't really play Boombots, which I think was another sequel. Skull Monkeys was the first sequel, and then Boombots was the second sequel. But I never played that one. I should give that one a shot. But I'm sure there were references to some of this stuff, some of these other creatures and worlds in that game too. So let's keep going here. See who's next. Ah, here we go. Now we're getting to the most relevant one of all. Hoborg. And I might want to save this one for when my nephew's here, because this one is actually the most relevant to this game, at least. The story of Hoborg is very important to this game. So the next episode is, even though if you guys have been, well, if you're listening to this, you're probably one of the most dedicated hardcore Let's Play listener. One of the few, if you're listening at this point. But you definitely want to stick around for the next one, because Hoborg is the key to this game. He's like the man. So one thing I wanted to mention before I go, some people wonder, like, in D&D, when I was talking about D&D, I did want to talk about how hardcore it was, like, and like when you die in D&D, like you spend all this time creating a character, and your character dies. Like you create a character that has only one hit point, you're gonna get one hit killed all the time. original D&D, if your hit points go to 0, you're dead. There's no going there's no going below 0. You're dead. You have to create a new character. That's it. Um, and your character, you create a character at level 1. I mean, I house rule stuff too. Like you have to house rule stuff because it's depressing. It's depressing, especially if you've created a character at level 17 and your character dies and you have to start over. People will quit. So yeah, I let them create characters at the same level. And I mean, this is why the games have gotten easier. Um, not just role playing games, tabletop role playing games, but all video games. But the easier you make games, the I think a lot of the fun of achieving it, a lot of the fun of beating it goes away. Like you don't have that same satisfaction. You don't get that same yes, I did it. God, yes, God, I beat you. You God, you. You don't have that same. You just I beat it. Yeah, okay, done. It's like there's that satisfaction you get from beating a really hard game that you don't get from beating an easy, like a game that doesn't require that same, that doesn't punish you, that like these old games did. These games punished you. Like that's why people like Dark Souls, because Dark Souls punished you as you played it. It also had a really good story too. Um, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about these old games, and that's why I like to go back and I like to show them to my nieces and nephews and show them what games used to be like. They weren't these easy little games that they get exposed to now, that they like to play now. They were harder, and they were a little bit more. It demanded a little bit more from you, a little bit more patience, you know. But there's a lot more choices now. So it's easy, you get frustrated, you just go onto a new game. Um, and I think that's what it is. That's why they have to make it easy, because like people will just give up. When your character dies in D&D, you're just going to be like, all right, I'm not going to play anymore. I don't have the time for this. Um, yeah. I've house ruled stuff in where like if you go to 0, if your character dies, as long as it doesn't go too far below 0, if your party comes up with a creative way to somehow revive you, depending on the way your character died. Like let's say you got bashed in the head somehow. If your character somehow manages to figure out a way to get you out of danger and maybe bring you to like a cleric, a high-level cleric in time. Maybe there's a way they can somehow bring you back. But, it's like normally it just doesn't work, It's not, there's, or maybe they could do first aid. Maybe they could stop the bleeding. Maybe if they know something, if there's like a role they can do. Sometimes I'm a little lenient, but you have to house rule stuff in just to keep players from quitting. And that's how you got from D&D First Edition to D&D Fifth Edition, where things got really easy. There's a lot more hand holding. There's a lot more. And that's how you got from, games like this that kind of punish you a bit and put you through these, yeah, we're going to make you walk down this whole hallway, to games that, would never even think about doing something like this. But here I am. I'm torturing myself for probably, I only read this hallway once before. I usually don't read it. I read it probably the first time I played it, and then I never did it again. So a lot of this is new to me because I forgot most of it. But it's fun reading it again, but at the same time, yeah, it's a little bit, anyway, it's a little bit of a torture. It's a little bit, it is putting my obsessive compulsiveness to its limits. But I always had a bit of a masochistic side to me, so this is definitely fun in that respect. All right, Clayman, you having fun with yourself there? I'm gonna end this episode here, and I don't know when I'll be back. I don't know when we will all get together again to. I just want my nephew here. He doesn't like it when I do this on my own, so we'll continue whenever. All right, goodbye.